Joining us now is New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt. He is one of 4 reporters bylined on this breaking story. I should also note that Mr. Schmidt is one of the Times reporters who recently learned that his own records were also secretly seized by the Trump administration in a separate leak investigation. Michael Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's really short notice.
Thanks for having me.
Let me ask you, you've heard me sum up your reporting essentially just by reading excerpts from it here. Let me ask you to sum it up in your own terms and tell us what is, as far as we can tell, unprecedented, what is important about this.
I think that the most important thing, or the biggest sort of one of the more fundamental problems with the entire episode, is that this is what Donald Trump wanted. And this is why legal experts and people on both sides of the aisle say that the president of the United States should not weigh in about criminal investigations. And he should not talk about using the Justice Department to target a rival. Because if the Justice Department does something, it is seen immediately through that lens. We look at this and we say, Adam Schiff, a constant target of Donald Trump, has his entire staff and one of the staff's children subpoenaed, has their information subpoenaed from Apple. This is exactly what the president said publicly and privately that he wanted. So now here we are today, more than 6 months after Trump leaves office, finding out about this. And what is the first thing that comes to mind? This is what Trump wanted. This is what he said. And you have to remember, this happened in a period of time in early 2018 in which the Justice Department was under immense pressure from the president. Now, do we know that this exact move was done because of that? No. But we do know that in that period of time, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General thought they could be fired at any moment. They were afraid that if they were fired, Robert Mueller would be removed. And they were also under fire, especially the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, from Republicans on Capitol Hill who wanted to impeach him. So it was in that period of time that this happened.
And Michael, as far as we know, there's, from your reporting, the way it's described, there's no evidence that Congressman Schiff or any other members, Democratic members of the House Intelligence Committee or any of their staff or indeed their children were actually involved in mishandling classified information or in any other leaks. There's no indication in your reporting that there was any wrongdoing on their part that might have at least retroactively justified this kind of unprecedented step.
Look, we have no idea what the Justice Department was basing this on. We have no idea what type of evidence there was to get them to this point. Issuing a subpoena for a member of Congress is supposed to be treated as something that has to clear a high bar because of the fact that it is another branch of government and it is a very invasive thing and it can be seen as a political action given the give and take, certainly the give and take that was going on at the time. But we don't know what the Justice Department was basing this on, but we do know that this is exactly what Trump was saying and what Trump wanted. Trump was ranting and raving in private about how the powers of the Justice Department should be used to go after the press, to go after his rivals. And he was open about that. He's not going to, question the authenticity of that reporting. I mean, this is something that he really, really wanted. And he was exerting enormous pressure on the department when this happened.
But it is one thing to know that President Trump was, as you say, demanding that the Justice Department be used as a political tool against his enemies, that they use their immense power, investigative power and otherwise, to punish and investigate his enemies at his whim. It's one thing to know that about him. It's another thing to know that the Justice Department was doing this stuff, that this did not land on deaf ears, that under 2 different Trump attorneys general, stuff like this happened. One of the things that sort of audibly gasped when I got to the end of your article was the note, the list of names of people who were involved in these actions at the Justice Department, certainly briefed on them and kept up to date on them, who are still at the Justice Department under Merrick Garland. These aren't just Trump political appointees who are now gone who did this stuff. These, at least from your reporting, would appear to be people who are still there now.
Correct. People that are still there now. And in regards to the larger stuff that has been disclosed here, the other subpoenas and fights that have gone on for information between the Justice Department and the press, the Justice Department was seeking information from my and three of my colleagues' emails up until just a few days ago. This was until early June that this fight was going on between our legal counsel, David McCraw, in secret with prosecutors at the Justice Department. This wasn't something that happened into February, maybe a couple of weeks into the Biden administration. It wasn't something that happened a couple of weeks into when Merrick Garland took over. This is something that was going on close to almost the 6-month mark of Biden being in office. And now the Justice Department has completely reversed itself and says they will not do this. Is that because they're embarrassed by what happened? And why is it that the fight continued under Merrick Garland for the metadata from my emails?
Right. And if these were politically motivated and or otherwise improper actions by the Justice Department, not only why did they continue after the change in administration, but even if they hadn't continued after the change in administration, what's the recourse within the Justice Department to find out the extent of this, to punish the people who did it, or at least to investigate them to figure out what exactly they did and to deter this from happening again? That's becoming a larger and larger question every day in the Merrick Garland era of the Justice Department, the more we learn about what's been happening. New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt, I know this is a breaking story just posted. Thanks for helping us understand it.
Thanks for having me.